Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
Welcome into the Matt Bernier Show on this Black Eyed Susan Friday, May 20th, 2016. Matt Bernier here, Daily Racing Forum Studios. If you're watching on DRF Live, thanks for giving us a look. This is the kickoff of our Black Eyed Susan coverage here on DRF Live today. We'll be back on later on about 2:30, getting you ready through the majority of the stakes action this afternoon from Pimlico down in Baltimore. But obviously all things leading into tomorrow afternoon, where we will see if Nyquist can successfully obtain the second jewel in racing's Triple Crown. We'll dive into that a little bit here later on. This is only going to be a half-hour show compared to the hour that we normally do. Again, if you're watching live on DRF Live, live.drf.com. If you watch the podcast version, whether it's YouTube, SoundCloud, drf.com, or espn.com, we've got all sorts of avenues for you to check us out. But here we are, the live portion of this entire thing. We're going to have Michael Beychok on. He's a former NHC champion. We'll get his thoughts on what we saw in the Derby 2 weeks ago, what he thinks we may see this afternoon in the Black Eyed Susan, as well as tomorrow afternoon in the Preakness. But really, all things kind of this weekend revolves around Nyquist, more or less. And there are a lot of good horses running, and we'll dive into some of those later on as well with a little bit of handicapping. But at the end of the day, this weekend revolves around the Preakness and revolves around Nyquist in particular, simply because at this stage in the game, he's the only one around that can possibly run for a Triple Crown in 3 weeks at Belmont Park. First things first, let's get through tomorrow and let's get through Baltimore. It's a situation where he's going to be a very heavy favorite tomorrow. He's 3 to 5 in the morning line. We'll show the little poll I did as far as Twitter is concerned about where the odds look like they're stacking up based on the 600 or so people that voted on it. Again, that'll be at the end of the show, but I think 3 to 5, that's pretty accurate. Seems like that's where they'll ultimately end up going off at, I should say, for Nyquist. And really, it's on the heels of this performance in the Kentucky Derby, where he didn't do anything wrong. He sat close to a fast pace. He went on with it. There was really no excuses for anyone else. Some people wanted to say that the track may have been a little bit speed-friendly. I don't particularly agree with that. At the end of the day, he's just a good horse, and he's a solid horse, and he's going to have to find out if he can continue on with this. And tomorrow he'll have to probably deal with something he hasn't dealt with in the past, and that's significant rain. And it's sounding like we're going to get a pretty sloppy track tomorrow afternoon down there in Baltimore. We'll find out if that ultimately kind of plays against him and maybe plays into the hands of some of the other runners, particularly his main rival, Exaggerator. And I don't even know if we can really call it a rivalry at this stage in the game, simply because Exaggerator's never beaten him. It's not much of a rivalry when it's one-sided. A rivalry requires a little bit of give and take, a little bit of you win, you win, you win. At this stage in the game, there is no rivalry. He's just the second best horse, and right now he can't get within hailing distance of Nyquist. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake down, if the wet track really moves Exaggerator up that much, or he is what he is. He runs his race. He's a nice horse. And maybe, if anything, I don't know that it will particularly mean that Exaggerator moves up enough where he can turn the tables on Nyquist. I wonder if the wet track would be wet enough where it actually hindered Nyquist. I don't think that that's a likely scenario, but at the end of the day, there's no guarantee until he actually goes out and does it. So he's going to be a heavy favorite. Exaggerator likely going to be a very, very heavy second choice, a very clear second choice in this race. It'll be interesting to see, and really the X factor of the entire race tomorrow afternoon is going to be coming from Todd Pletcher's barn in Stradivari. Stradivari is a horse coming off a very flashy allowance victory at Keeneland a couple weeks back. Got a 100 buyer speed figure. That's one of the few 100 buyers in the entire field. He's got the far outside post. That's no bargain. But it'll be interesting to see. A lot of people, he's sort of the wise guy, if you want to go ahead and say that, but I don't know how much of a wise guy horse he can actually be if the poll results are accurate, and if some of the whispers that you see and hear on Twitter, where for a long time it seemed like he was going to be a horse that had a lot of steam and a lot of talk and a lot of wagering support. At this stage in the game, I don't know if that's going to be accurate. I feel like the top two have separated themselves, and we'll see. Stradivari will be the third choice, but I don't know how short he'll be. Is he more Bernardini, or is he more social inclusion? That'll be one of the questions that I ask Mike Beychok here momentarily. And let's not totally overlook today's highlight. That's the Black Eyed Susan. It's for the fillies, the 3-year-olds. They're going to be going 1 1/8. You've got the top two, or two of the top horses coming out of the Kentucky Oaks. Landover Sea, Go Maggie Go. They're going to come into this race heavy favorites. They'll be first and second choice. Is it a two-horse race, or do you think you can find some value elsewhere? Later on, again, once we're done, this show's only going to be a half hour today. 2:30 Eastern, myself, Ilman Beer, we'll bring you through all the races right through the Black Eyed Susan. We'll dive into that some more at that point in the game. But it'll be interesting to see. We've got a good 2 days of racing. Today it seems like it's going to be the preferred one as far as the weather is concerned. Tomorrow, though, the highlight, Nyquist, tries to go for the second jewel in racing's Triple Crown in the Preakness. We're going to take a quick break here. Again, 30 minutes. We got to get a lot in a little amount of time. When we come back, we'll bring in NHC champion and my good buddy Michael Beychok to talk about Preakness, Nyquist, and plenty more. Stay with us.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
.1207 on the East Coast, 907 West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. If you're watching the podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com, ESPN.com. You've got a whole plethora of ways to watch, and you're going to want to tune in if you're watching it live or even just going to go back and listen to this archive, because my good friend, NHC champion Michael Beychok is joining us on the phone to talk all things Pimlico this weekend. Mike, what's going on?
Matt, how are you doing today? I think the last time I was at the Preakness, I think you were there.
I believe so.
Sure. So yeah.
Believe that was the first time. Believe that was the first time we actually encountered one another. Maybe with the exception of the year after you won the NHC. I was in the NHC and with a couple of my best friends from home, and we crossed paths in the elevator, and when you left to go to your room, I said, that's the guy that won $1 million last year, and hence the nickname, the $1 Million Man.
I'm sure I was very brusque and blew you off or something, you know. That first time, I didn't even know where I was probably after I'd won the thing. So
hey, you were focused. You were focused.
Yeah, I was focused, yeah.
Let's talk. Obviously, you've got the Preakness coming up tomorrow. We've got the Black-Eyed Susan. We'll dive into the races themselves here momentarily. Let's rewind the clock 2 weeks, though. Overall, the Derby itself, who did you like going into it? What did you think overall of the running? Was there anything that was disappointing or surprising to you, or did it all kind of hold the form?
Yeah, strange Derby for me. I had no real opinion on who I thought was going to win the race. But I had a strong opinion, which turned out to be wrong, on who I thought was not going to win the race, or really who I was not going to bet. And I was definitely against Mo Heyman. And, you know, it kind of turned out okay, but it really wasn't a good opinion in the end. He ran very well. And I was not ever going to bet Nyquist because of the price, you know, but God bless everybody who took 2-1 in a 20-horse field. You know, I mean, really, that's just... It doesn't bother me that I lost that race because, I mean, I'm never going to have that horse at all. But that being said, you know, I was on more Spirit, just almost by default because Bob Baffert and Gary Stevens and, you know, he had run second. I really had no real opinion on who was going to win. I came out of the race with a very strong opinion of Nyquist, though I think he's, you know, obviously very legit. That's not an expert observation. Obviously, anybody who watched the race. So, I'm a pretty good fan of him now for tomorrow's purposes.
Now, it's too early to be comparing him, directly to American Pharoah last year, but immediately that's the natural reaction where you've got a horse that has got plenty of accolades at this stage in his career. He's unbeaten. He's done all X, Y, and Z. I mean, at this stage, going into Baltimore compared to last year, where do you compare the two of them? Is he on par? You think he's a cut below, or do you think they're similar animals?
I think this is similar circumstances. So he's facing, mostly the same horses that he ran against in Kentucky, much like American Pharoah. It doesn't appear to be, a horse that I saw, at least in Kentucky, that could beat him if he runs, the race that he ran in Kentucky. Some people were saying, well, Exaggerator was getting to him, and, if they had a little better trip. And listen, if they ran around the track one more time on the Derby, there was no way Exaggerator was getting past Nyquist, and plus the Preakness is shorter. So I guess in those terms, it's similar because I think that was kind of the same situation or setup that Pharoah got last year. Now, I'm not putting Nyquist in the class of American Pharoah at any way, shape, or form. That he was a special horse. Who was a bit faster on speed figures. I think we can all agree about that. And who obviously proved that he was just a different cut of thoroughbred than anybody that we've seen. But to use the old Jack Van Berg term, when people start knocking Nyquist, saying, well, he hadn't beaten anybody. Well, he's beaten everybody they brought to him. So, and I don't really see them bringing anybody to him this weekend that can beat him if circumstances, track condition, trip, if those, basically stay the same.
Well, you kind of alluded to the track condition and whatnot. It sounds like we're going to have a pretty substantial amount of rain. It seems like they've backtracked a little bit. Initially, they were talking about a nor'easter. We were going to have up to 2 inches of rain. Sounds like it's still going to be a wet one, but maybe not a complete deluge. If this race comes up sloppy, is it a concern for you at this stage in the game? I know he won the Florida Derby over good going. Is it a concern for you if this thing comes up an absolute slop fest? Do you think that's something that could beat him, or at this stage in the game, it's one of those, until he ends up stubbing his toe, expect him to go on and do what he's supposed to do?
Well, I think, that's why we bet on him. I think it definitely creates some doubt because he's never handled that track before, a sloppy track. Exaggerator has run over a sloppy track, but, not all sloppy tracks are created equal. Santa Anita, where he just performed like a monster, may not equal the same type of track if it's sloppy in Pimlico. So, but if he handles a sloppy track, he's going to win. I mean, in my opinion, I just don't see any way he doesn't win. Now, the next race, the Belmont, is a whole different situation. But tomorrow, if he's able to handle the track, and no one's, there's no real evidence that he will or won't. Then, if he handles it, he's going to win tomorrow.
As far as Exaggerator is concerned, is there any way, shape, or form that you can really see him realistically turning the tables on this horse? He's chased him time and time again throughout his young career, and he just doesn't seem to be able to get to him. Is it a situation where he's just not as good as that horse?
Hasn't he lost to him 4 times?
Boy, it's at least 4 at this stage in the game. If I'm doing a quick run through the PPs, I see Nyquist 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 different occurrences out of his 10-race career.
Yeah, so let's just take it on. So in 2 weeks, has Exaggerator found a couple of extra lengths to make up on Nyquist? And maybe he finds those in a sloppy track. Maybe not. I don't think that, I don't think we should expect him to, in 2 weeks, run a better race than he did in the Santa Anita Derby, or a better race than he did in the Kentucky Derby, and then turn the tables on Nyquist. Now, if Nyquist stubs his toe, all bets are off. Anybody can probably win, but Exaggerator would certainly be the most logical alternative to a Nyquist if he stubs his toe. But you beat him 4 times in a row. I think it's pretty clear who the better horse is at this point.
NHC champion Michael Beychok joins us here on the Matt Bernier Show. Let's talk real quick about the sort of X factor, the wise guy horse, if you will, Stradivari. He's got a brutal post on the far outside. Todd Pletcher doesn't seem to be too concerned about it. Where do you stand with this horse? Do you think he's the goods? I mean, visually he looked fantastic at Keeneland, but he beat a bunch of tomato cans. Now he's going to face real animals for the first time. Where do you think he stands up? Do you think he passes the acid test?
I'm a bit against him. I think, if I'm making exotic wagers with, Nyquist and Exaggerator, I would probably leave him out just because I believe I saw this from the Daily Racing Form Formulator stats that Pletcher has a pretty terrible record with these type of horses in the Preakness. I thought it was like 1 out of 32, where the horse didn't start in the Derby and now is running in the Preakness. Yeah, did he look pretty? He looked really good against, as you said, tomato cans. I didn't think it was that impressive, but Twitter blew up and, thought he was the next coming of American Pharaoh. I thought it was a nice performance, but I didn't think it was something that, was going to impact the future of the classics. But he's fast. But I'm a little bit against him. So the post doesn't help. These other horses have run a lot of races. They have a lot of experience. They had dirt in their face. They've had horses bumping them, all that kind of stuff. And, when you throw a horse in a race with other horses that have more experience, I think, it sometimes can tell. And then the price might not be right on this horse. It looks like he might be, 9-2, 5-1. It seems a little cheap for what you're asking this horse to do in his third start in his career, in my opinion.
Before we move on to the girls this afternoon, let's button up the Preakness. And knowing your prolific career as a tournament handicapper, I want to kind of pose the question to you 3 different ways. As far as the Preakness is concerned, if you're in a contest and you're up by $10 going into the Preakness, where do you go?
That's a great situation. It's like situation handicapping and situation managing, right? If it's the last race of the contest, then I would definitely go to Exaggerator because he could probably beat me at 3-1, and then I would lose the contest. I would actually have Nyquist, already in my pocket. He could win, and I would win the contest. So if I'm up 10, I'm going Exaggerator. Let's say I'm down, 20s, where an Exaggerator won't help me. There's no doubt that I'm going with Lonnie, who I actually like to run. I like Lonnie to run a really big race, and I think if it's sloppy, it probably helps him. He's kind of the mystery horse, and I wish he would have won the Derby. I had a pretty big future bet, so I'm usually going to be, early. What do you call it? Late for the wedding, early for the funeral. So, but I seriously think he has some talent. I've seen his races in Japan. He seems to have a quick burst of speed. He actually ran a pretty good race in the Derby. So that would be my buster if I'm way behind in a contest, and that's who I would take.
And now let's just say, hypothetically, you're in a scenario where we're talking give or take, you're either up or down $1 or so. Boy, Nyquist, it's going to, in some instances, maybe Nyquist is the play. Where would you go if you were in a very, very tight scenario?
I would probably go to Nyquist if I was up $1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I'm just not going to let the most likely winner win the race and then beat me. I'm going to make somebody who's in second or third, who's behind me, go pick Exaggerator. I'm going to put, as you and I have discussed before, I'm going to put the math and statistics on my side. I know in the long run that I'm going to come out ahead. I may lose that particular contest, but I know that if I'm up $2 or $3, and I just can't leave the favorite sitting there for the guy in second or the lady in second or third to pick that horse that's going to win statistically 50% of the time. That's just that's not good math.
Before we let you go, Michael Beychok, let's talk about the girls this afternoon. The 3-year-old fillies, Black Eyed Susan, Landover C, Go Maggie Go. They both exit the Kentucky Oaks, put in pretty good efforts. Do you think it's as simple as those two and everyone else? And if you like anyone else other than those two, who do you like?
Well, Landover C surely did run a really big race, kind of as expected. I liked her a little bit, I liked her quite a bit in the Oaks. She just got outrun by a much faster filly. I'm a little against Go Maggie Go just based on, she's had 3 races in the last 2 months, and Sometimes those horses can go backwards. She had a kind of rough trip in the Oaks, and she's going to get overbet. So I'm kind of against her a little bit. Landover Sea to me is the horse to beat. I do like a little bit of a price play. Mom's on Strike has had, coming off. This is not a good statistical angle, but coming off a maiden win at Oaklawn, trained by Joe Sharp, Rosie Napravnik's husband. So you got that going for you, which is nice. But she's fast, and she looks like she can develop, and, she might be 20, 25 to 1, which is attractive. So I think Landover Sea is the horse to beat, but underneath I'm going to be using Mom's on Strike and maybe a little bit of She's a Warrior, just because the angle of chasing Songbird seems to be working out pretty good for horses.
The Mom's on Strike play is interesting, and I'm getting a little nervous now simply because a lot of people I know and respect, you, Mike Beer, myself, we all like this horse. I'm starting to wonder if we're not going to get the price that we initially thought we were going to get.
Well, I don't know. I'd be happy with the morning line if I could get some of that.
Certainly.
Her last race I watched, and it was very impressive. And it was a big field. She beat the rest of the field pretty good. And look, I don't know why Joe Sharpen would run her here. It just doesn't make that much sense, except for the fact that he thinks he's got a live horse and they're going to take a shot. And she certainly she can develop a little bit more. Now, she's got to beat Landover. I think Landover Sea is a big choice here if she runs her race again. But again, you're asking her to run a lot of races in a short period of time, but she's got more seasoning to do it.
NHC champion Michael Beychok, my good friend. Mike, I appreciate you giving us some time here on this Friday. Get ready, go get your plays in, settle in, enjoy this afternoon, enjoy tomorrow, and we'll cross paths soon, huh?
Sounds great. Thank you for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, bud. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll dive into some quick handicapping, a little review, a little preview, and then we'll get out of here, bring you in for DRF Live later on this afternoon. Stay with us, the Matt Bernier Show.
Opening day at Monmouth Park Racetrack is Saturday, May 14th, as the shore's greatest summertime tradition continues.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Breeders' Cup Classic. Private Zone has run a 45 flat half mile and has opened up 2.5 lengths. Private Zone's got the lead close to home and he's all by himself. Private Zone wins the Forgo.
12:25 East Coast, 9:25 West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live. I want to thank Michael Beychok, again, NHC champion, for giving us some time, giving us some thoughts on the Preakness and the Black-Eyed Susan. Especially, not only is he a good friend of mine, but he's done a lot for me. He's been a bit of a mentor among many mentors that I've had in this brief time in here. So I thank him for giving me a little bit of time here on the show today. Let's dive into a review and preview of what we've got to come. The review of last week, we're going to have to do it nice and tight because we're down to the final 5 or 6 minutes of the show. So the review from last week, we'll start off with the Ruffian. I thought the most likely winner was Carumba. She was going to take a lot of money. I thought a live long shot was a 3 spelling again. Larry Comas with the call. No audio. I'm going to go through it and tell you what happens. Cavorting struts her stuff. We said going into this race that if Cavorting ran her race, she was the only one capable of throwing up some sort of a big 90 or a triple-digit buyer. I just didn't know which Cavorting we were going to get. You see Carumba, she's trying. You've got Spelling again. She's clunking along for third, just passing tired horses. This is a big effort from Cavorting. I believe she got a 97 buyer. And look, at this stage in the game, if she can move forward off that, I don't know what you want to do with her or where they're going to point toward ultimately, but that was a very impressive performance. The problem for me is taking her at a short price. I don't know which one I'm going to get. Am I going to get 80? Get that big number, that big 95, 96, 97, 100 buyer. So we don't know what we're going to get from her. Most likely winner I thought was Carumba. She runs a decent second. Spelling again, live long shot, she runs third. Man of War, most likely winner, the number 9 Wake Forest for Chad Brown. Live long shot, the number 1 Morandi for Chad Brown as they turn for home. This is a situation where this is the wrong race. That's okay, though. We can pull that out. It's a situation where, look, Wake Forest ultimately was just the best horse in the race. He ended up getting a good trip, and you're seeing Strike Charmer again. These are the fillies. This is not the same race. Wake Forest was just much the best in there. I know he was down inside for a while. He angled outside. He got clear run. There was nothing else anybody else could do about it. Morandi, I thought, was tremendously disappointing considering he got a very good trip sitting out into the clear with Javier. I thought he was going to put in a big bid down the lane. Didn't work out for him, unfortunately. And at this stage in the game, maybe he just doesn't want to do it anymore. He's been hurt frequently. He's never been the soundest animal. So Morandi, a disappointment as a live long shot. Most likely winner, Wake Forest, gets the job done. You can find that replay in Formulator. Go back, pull up the charts, go to the Man of War. You can run it back. The last Barrera was out in Southern California. I didn't like I Will Score particularly. I thought he was a bit of a vulnerable favorite. You see him on the front end here. But the one thing we did say going into it, he wants to fight you. I just didn't know if he was going to be able to take other waves of heat. When Iron Rob, who was already out of the picture, missed the break, things changed. Mrazek just doesn't quite get there. We thought Mrazek was an interesting runner. Illman and I picked him. He loses by a neck to a very game I Will Score. Thought it was a good effort from the Hollendorfer runner. The problem I have is if they're going to come east, then you got to run into a sharp ass tacket, and who knows what we'll find out tomorrow in the Sir Barton or some of these other races, the Chick Lang. I think they're going to have to step it up if they're going to be able to hang with the East Coast sprinters. Let's dive into some previews for this upcoming weekend. Let's start. We've got 2 for today, 2 for tomorrow. The Hilltop, I think a live long shot in this race is the number 9, Channel Regatta. She's 12-1 on the morning line. I don't know ultimately what she's going to go off at. If you've got some time between now and post time for the Hilltop, and we'll talk about it again, 2:30 Eastern here on DRF Live, myself, Illman, Beer. She looks like the goods. She's going to come back, wheel back in 13 days for Hamilton Smith. I think she's a very, very live runner in here. I'm going to key a lot of things into her, whether it's multis, whether it's individual race. She looks like she has that sort of star potential. We'll find out as an earlier or young 3-year-old if she can take a step forward and make a move. Black-Eyed Susan, I think the most likely winner. I agree with Mike Beychok. Land Oversea, I think, is the most likely winner. I still prefer Go Maggie Go, simply because at the end of the day, I think she has more of a tactical advantage. She can be more forwardly placed than she was in the Kentucky Oaks. And by the way, just so you're aware, all of our coverage today brought to you by our friends down at Monmouth Park and the Jersey Shore. They had a nice opening weekend last weekend. They'll have some good racing going on this weekend as well. Back to the Black-Eyed Susan. I think Land Oversea is the most likely winner. The horse that I'm picking, though, and we kind of alluded to it, Beychok likes her, Mike Beer likes her, I like her. There's a lot of weight on this filly. She's drawing the far outside, but she's moved in a couple because it won't be updated here, but we'll talk about it once we get into the DRF Live coverage. We've got a couple scratches. The 14, Mom's on Strike. She'll break from post 12. She moves in 2 spots. I think she'll be forwardly placed. I think she's going to work out a decent trip, hopefully. And by the way, Junior, it'll be Arad Ortiz Jr. aboard. I think Mom's on Strike is an interesting long shot in the Black-Eyed Susan today. 12:29, rapid fire. Let's go into tomorrow. Sir Barton, you've got to throw the disclosure out there, the disclaimer. You have no idea what the track's going to look like. Could be an absolute sea of slop out there, or who knows? We've seen it. We're getting into that summer, late spring, early summer period where thunderstorm can come and go, and you have no idea. So just be very cognizant. These you're going to have to take with a bit of a grain of salt. I think in the Sir Barton, a live long shot, the 4 Voluntario, 10-1 morning line for Rudy Rodriguez, comes down from New York, ran a very good second to a horse called Seymour Dini, who's got a lot of upside. A lot of people here think very highly of him. I think this is a very interesting run of the 4 Voluntario in the Sir Barton, but again, that'll be contested more likely than not on a sloppy track. Let's go into the Dixie. That's the race prior to the Preakness. Part of that late pick 4. I think the most likely winner is Grand Arch, the number 7 horse. He likes cutting the ground. He's coming off the layoff. If he's ready and he fires fresh, he's going to be very interesting and very tough to beat. I've never been a big fan of his, but at the end of the day, you've got to respect what he's done. A good third in the Breeders' Cup Mile last year behind Tepin. He won the Shadwell 2 starts back over Yield and Going. I think he's the most likely winner. Live long shot, drawn far outside the 13 Cage Fighter. Draw a line through his most recent start, his first start of 2016. He lost both front shoes, or he had issues with them. He had a steady. It was a disastrous trip. He has early pace. I don't know ultimately where he's going to work out as far as the trip is concerned. Maybe he'll get cooked, but he loves Pimlico. He loves cutting the ground. And again, I think he just draw a line through that most recent start. I think he's an interesting one at a big number in this spot. It is now about 12:31, so all things considered, all right, we're a minute heavy. Shoot me. It's not the end of the world. The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF Live. If you watched live, thank you. If you missed it or you want to go back and re-listen to the interview we had with Mike Beychok, NHC champion, you've got DRF.com, you've got SoundCloud, you have YouTube.com, you also have ESPN.com, and I believe we're going to have to film a little quick sort of, we do our after show. It's on ESPN.com, solely for ESPN.com, so you want to go and check that out as well. Again, thanks for giving us a look.